Hello, everyone. Welcome. We'll give everybody a moment to get into the webinar and get all set up, and then we will get started. Okay, I see the numbers ticking up. I think we're good to go. So welcome, everyone. My name's Tony Phelan. I'm a program manager for MBA programs at Forte. Thank you for joining us today for Conquer Your Career Consulting. This event is part of our Conquer Your Career virtual series, which offers an inside look at what it means to be a woman with an MBA working in various fields. So let's get started. So consultants can help organizations improve their performance. Often this means that these individuals play a key advisory role, creating tailored solutions to complex business situations, all while navigating a dynamic industry. Our panelists today have found their fit in this industry, and we'll discuss the knowledge, skills, and abilities that can help launch someone into this career path after getting their MBA. So let's get started.
Hi, everyone.
Okay.
Oh,
Yep, over to you, Madeline.
okay. Hi, everyone. Happy to have you all here and to chat about consulting. My name is Madeline Hall. I'm a current consultant at Boston Consulting Group, and I graduated from Cornell Johnson Business School last spring.
Wonderful, thank you. And next we have Lillian.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning. Thank you all for being here. I'm jealous for anybody who's in B school right now. I wish I were still there. I am a senior manager in strategy at Accenture. I graduated from Carnegie Mellon's Tepper School of Business in 2017, and during B school, I was a Forte Fellow.
Amazing. We love to hear it. Okay, and last but not least, Alexandra.
Yeah, nice to meet everyone. My name is Alexandra Pitcher, but I actually go by Ola, like hi in Spanish. So if anyone runs into me, that's how I go by. I went to the University of Chicago, both undergrad and for business school, graduated in 2019, and now I'm a director at the Alexander Group, also in Chicago.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, so I know we're going to have a great conversation today. So we'll get started with questions for our panelists, and we should have some time at the end for audience Q&A. And we just ask that you enter any questions that you might have using the Q&A feature rather than the chat, just so your questions don't get lost. But we will dive right in. Okay. So our first question is going to be for you, Alexandra. What is a typical day like for you? And how do you feel like your work has an impact at your organization?
Yeah, I think that this will be the typical consulting answer, but it really depends on what day it is, as well as the client that you're working with and what really their problem or challenge, concern is that you're working on them with. So really that can look very different from project to project, day to day, week to week, which I think is one of the reasons that really draws people into consulting, seeing that we're starting to, after quite a few projects, you can actually start to see the frameworks and the way that you're working kind of meld across projects. But when you first start, it does feel sometimes like drinking from a fire hose, meaning, oh shoot, this day is really different than the one that I had last week. What does that look like? So in order to get pretty clear on how you get good at this, I found that being very organized, making sure that you understand kind of your priorities for the day, working with your team is very important to success, to make sure that even though the days are different, you know what you're looking to achieve every day, especially at the end, being able to say, I had a good day because I actually got something done and it was the thing that I was meant to. So that's what I like about consulting. And in terms of my work and the impact to my organization, the Alexander Group is a boutique consulting firm focused on commercial organizations. And so we do a lot of sales, a lot of commercial or customer success type work. And so I think that as a consultant, and I'm sure that Madeline and William feel the same way, part of the fun of interacting with your customers is that exchange of what we as consultants know, what our best practices, what our frameworks, what works well for other clients of ours, but also getting feedback from the client about what they do and what works well for them, and then kind of having that really interesting exchange. So in terms of impact back to my work and my colleagues at AGI, it's really learning about what works well, what doesn't, and then bringing that in and sharing with others.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. Our next question is for Madeline. So, how does one become good at networking within the consulting industry? What does, a good coffee chat look like? And what are some best practices to make a good first impression, especially while still in business school?
Great question. Yeah, I think networking and coffee chats is kind of a term that, if you haven't heard it already, it means essentially like a 20-minute conversation, like informational conversation with usually someone new that you haven't met before. I think that ranges in business school with coffee chats, with your networking with people that are your classmates and maybe the year above you that have been in consulting that you're trying to get to know different firms about, but then also coffee chatting with alumni and then actual practitioners at across the firms. And I've also found that networking in my first year here at BCG has been very, very crucial just to kind of learn and meet people and get on to staff cases. So I think a big thing that I have learned over my networking experience and kind of business school especially is just to come prepared to your conversations with targeted questions that you have done your due diligence to asked like specific questions about the person's experience. People always love to talk about themselves, but also questions about the firm specifically that you're talking to versus having more of a templated version that you can talk to about anyone. So really make things very specific if you can. And then also just being conversational. Consulting at the end of the day is people want to work with people that they can converse with and enjoy working with and will put in front of a client. So that coffee chat is like a first impression essentially, to make sure that you can have a conversation with someone and be personable and ask good questions and make eye contact over Zoom also. And then the last thing I'll say is you are the one that set up the coffee chat. So make sure that you're actually owning the meeting and don't just like wait for the person that you're speaking with to take lead. Recently I've had to do that in a couple of coffee chats and it tells me that the person doesn't necessarily know how to take charge of the call. So just make sure that you're able to, thank them for being there and then, start right away with some introducing yourself and then heading into some questions.
Great. Thank you. That preparation piece is just so important. So, great advice. Thank you. Our next question, we're going to go to Lillian and then Madeline. So, can you please describe the recruitment process in consulting? What strategies or tactics did you use to prepare for MBA level interviews? And if you have any recommendations for folks who want to stand out from the crowd during the recruitment process, please share that as well. So, Lillian and then Madeline right after that.
All right. I'm the furthest out from B school, so Madeline will keep me honest with what it looks like more recently. But in general, recruiting starts your first year. Some firms will have second year recruiting as well, but I know that that's changed over the years. So typically at your business school, there's a consulting club or some other professional organization that they have a complete repository of like cases, a lot of other resources to help you prepare with like the interview process. So there's the case interview, which is what everybody freaks out about, but in general, basically the whole point the reason we do case interviews as consultants is it is the exact representation of what happens. Our clients come to us with highly ambiguous issues or highly ambiguous problems that have a lot of white space, and it's not meant to have a right or wrong answer. Sometimes there is, but majority of the time it's not. And also, caveat, you'll see case interviews in other industries as well. So it's just a good skill to build. The whole thing we're looking for in a case interview is how you think about and solve problems. So if you've never done case interviews before, there's a plethora of resources. So like I said, there's like usually consulting clubs at different schools have like a repository of cases. There's Case in Point. There's all types of books you can read about it. Use those resources to help you get an idea of how to structure your problem solving like method. I think the thing that's really important is not to get anchored on, oh, this is what I saw in this book, or this is what somebody taught me. It's starting to think about the case interview as like Think all the way back to second grade when you thought about scientific method and hypothesis. If somebody comes to you and asks you about something and a problem, what would you have done when you were 7 years old, when you learned about hypothesis and building your scientific method? That is a very simplified version of what we're doing. The next thing you need to do is practice. So leverage your classmates, leverage second-year students who've been successful in the consulting interviews, but also like in any other industry where you're doing case interviews, like in tech and everywhere else, because it's a skill set that's leveraged in other places. And a lot of your alumni networks, I know a lot of at all of your schools, alumni are more than willing to help, especially if there's like alumni that recruit from the different firms you're interested in. Also practice with them. So the reason why the practice and setting up these case interview prep is really important, because the more times you do it, it's like a muscle, you'll get better and better at it. The people who stand out in an interview are people who aren't so wedded to try to figure out what kind of case is this, or asking a lot of like questions trying to figure out if there's a right answer, but truly you demonstrate and you communicate in the interview how you're getting to the problem, solving the problem, setting up the problem, understanding information, building rapport, all in like 30, 45 minutes. The other piece of the interview process is behavioral. This is not to be underestimated. So like Madeline mentioned before, building relationships between your colleagues, but also with clients is really important. Early in your career as a consultant, it's to be able to like execute work. Later on, if you decide to stay on in consulting to more senior levels, it's being able to build a book of business and be a trusted advisor to those clients. So the behavioral interview is kind of a view of why you want to be in consulting, why you're motivated, what experience do you have that can be leveraged or shared or is unique. And so those are the things. And then it's also an opportunity for you to understand, like, is this firm the right firm for me, right? Because not every place, as much as we're interviewing you as the firm, you're also interviewing us to understand if it's a fit. And then there's usually a first round interview. There's usually a second round interview at most firms. In general, that's usually a confirming interview to make sure you're interested and make sure like maybe some more senior people are like aligned to what you and like what you're bringing to the firm. Because depending on the size of the firm, they may be looking for very specific talent to fill certain void, depending on other firms. If it's really large, they may be looking for different things. So they'll confirm that. If you're doing full-time recruiting, and this is again an experience that I don't know what it's like anymore, but usually you may get invited for that second round interview on site. So depending on where the firm is, you'll be invited to actually do that second round on site. Some firms will do super days. Well, they'll couple like the first and second round interview all in one day. And those could be held at their site. And I know ever since COVID, some of these things are done virtually.
Awesome. I can chime in. Great work, great stuff there. I think you really kind of nailed it on the interview, which I think is obviously a huge part of the recruiting process. I'll touch a little bit on just every school is very different in business school and how they obviously go about recruiting. I think at a high level, Lillian mentioned the consulting club, so that's something that you'll want to join early on. Like it really does start almost like before school even begins. Just so really have a sense for, take some time to reflect, I would say, on just like what you're interested in doing and how you see your career progressing and what actual work you want to do so that you can kind of get a kickstart on what kind of firms you would want to interview with. And then also I would think about like the location of where you want to live, because a lot of the firms are location and office specific. And so then you can have a little bit of a leg up on starting to reach out for coffee chats in terms of who you'll want to reach out to in certain offices. So those are kind of some early on things I would think about. And then consulting club, typically, at least at Cornell, it had like weekly meetings, and then whoever's leading that, either career services or maybe some second years, will really like usher you through week to week to help you prepare. And throughout those weeks, I assume most schools will be having companies doing briefings. So those usually take place for like a 30-minute presentation, followed by usually a networking session. So again, networking, so that you can meet people. And then that can also lead into like a more of a one-on-one conversation later down the line. And then coffee chats with second years and practitioners is kind of how things go throughout the fall, just to getting to know the firm. So again, it is a two-way conversation, like Elaine mentioned. So get all the information that you need out of these conversations to learn about the different firms, to then figure out where you want to apply. And then, of course, casing will be really important, as Elaine mentioned. So you will be very supported. I think most schools nowadays, like they have quite a structured process for the consulting program. Essentially, it's like very tailored to you and kind of and what you need so that you can be successful. But I would really just lean on your peers because everyone's going through the same thing, and hopefully it can be a more of a collaborative environment across your classmates.
And then one other thing for recruiting for consulting, I know a lot of clubs or a lot of schools will actually organize treks or visits to consulting firms, usually sometime in the fall, so that you can actually go to offices. So it's usually organized with alumni from your school and your career services office as well. So if you are interested in consulting and you want more information or don't have a lot of visibility, I would encourage you to go on those treks if they're offered at your school.
Mhm.
And also, if any firms don't go to your school, look at larger fairs like career fairs, so like Forte or other organizations who offer fairs, because just because a firm does not go to your school to recruit doesn't mean that you are completely like absolved of opportunity at that organization.
So many great tips. So many great tips. So thank you both. I know that was a big question, so you covered so much with that one. All right, we're going to go back to Alexandra now. So, Alexandra, I'd ask you to think back to your first role in consulting. How did you establish credibility with external clients as a new professional, and what actions did you take to ensure that you went into new projects with confidence?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. It's been quite a bit of a long time at this point since my first project, but I think that one thing for those of you who maybe have worked before, bringing that knowledge in from my previous work experience before I went to business school, that just helps kind of that professional knowledge that you may already have, whether that be previous work experience, full-time work experience or offline work experience. I think all of that, you just kind of have to garner and say, yes, I feel pretty confident that I should be in this room with you. The other things that you can do that are more tactical than just kind of talking yourself up are things like making sure that you do the proper research on the client beforehand. So making sure that you know the lingo of the industry, for example, healthcare, media, manufacturing, they all have things that they say that are very specific to them, and also kind of out you, unfortunately, as someone who may not know a lot about their industry before you even get started. So being able to tap on your resources, either the internet and AI or your company resources, to say, what is the primer on this industry or this company, can be really, really helpful. For myself, that's usually what gets me the confidence to be in the room, feeling like I have at least some background to be able to converse. And so I think that's really important. The other things are establishing with the folks on your team how we're going to interact. So is my role solely here to take notes and make sure that I'm kind of capturing what's going on? Or do I have a role within this meeting, this conversation, this broader project, and what does that look like? Typically, it'll be more of the latter. And so you can kind of prepare yourself to get started by understanding what your role is going to look like. I would also say that this is kind of true of any project that you run. There's always going to be some amount of credentializing that you need to do with your client day one as a consultant, or day 2000 as a consultant, because every client thinks of bringing on a consultant as a significant investment. And so they want to make sure that the people that, to Madeline's point, that they're spending time with have the expertise, are pleasant to work with, aren't snobs about how we do this all day. And so that's one of the things that I think is really important for all of you to internalize is, we may think we know a lot of the answers because of how often we do projects like the one that inevitably you've already done somewhere else. But there are always nuances that we want to keep in mind. And so having that kind of right um, view of the world, I think really makes or breaks your time with a client.
Thank you so much for that. Okay, we're going to head over to Madeline for our next question. Madeline, can you tell us what it means to be on the bench? And how do you strategically use that time that you might be on the bench to establish maybe your network or credibility or grow professionally?
Yeah. So the bench is a term that sometimes is called the beach in some firms. Essentially just means that you are not on a billable client. So at the time, maybe it's a couple weeks, maybe it's a couple days. It can really range. To be honest, my first year here at BCG, I've had a couple weeks put together of being on the beach, and sometimes it just takes time to get onto your first case or to have time in between cases, especially as you are building your network. I feel like the word network has come a lot. I've been saying that word a lot, but it really does mean a lot, especially in consulting. Um, so one of the top things I would say when you are on the beach is to network and to reach out to people. And that it can be all sorts of levels, from, the manager level above you, or upwards of like partners and things, upwards like senior leadership. Some folks are more responsive than others, but kind of I just give you all the courage to do those cold emails. I literally sent one or two out yesterday too. And so just to like get your name out there, especially if you're new to the company, to have those conversations, especially if there's people that are working in certain practice areas or industries or functions that seems interesting to you, and kind of just get to know them. Oftentimes you'll get staffed onto cases if you are top of mind for someone, if just the timing aligns. So if you have those conversations at like an important, maybe it was like a week or two before something is going to sell, then maybe you'll be top of mind for them. And then maybe it's like the next time you're on the bench, reach out to that person again and say, hey, like I'm available, or I'm coming available in the coming weeks if you have any work coming up. So networking is number one. And then some firms have more of a formalized like business development process. We call it at BCG STS, which is like short-term staffing. In other words, business development, BD work. So that will involve working on like proposals and pitch work to essentially sell future work to clients. So working on presentation decks for that, or other internal type BD work. So that will be sometimes assigned through, depending how the firm works, of course, but you can get assigned to certain side work like that so that you can still be productive and be busy, but you're not necessarily billing to a client per se. And then also I'm sure a lot of firms have online training platforms. So across a lot of different skills sets. So like maybe you want to work on modeling, or you want to work on more of a qualitative skill. Those are like, being on the beach is a great time to just take a second to like figure out, okay, what do I kind of need to work on? And you can take those times to do some trainings. All sorts of things you can do. Best idea is just stay productive as you can and learn skills in that meantime, and meet people and like show face in the office that you're still willing and interested in getting to know people. So those are kind of my main things I would think about.
Amazing. Thank you for that kind of inside look into what that term means in consulting. We're going to go to Lillian next. So, how have you intentionally built trust with senior partners or leaders at different stages in your career? What strategies have you used to gain visibility with these decision makers? So, kind of what Madeline was just talking about, especially when you're not working with them directly on a project at that time.
Yeah, I think early in your career as a consultant or analyst or whatever it looks like at a firm, especially coming from MBA, most of you have like good and pretty extensive work experience. So an easy way to do that is to leverage your experience previously. So one of the things is kind of not reading the room, but understanding what's going on in the world. So like knowing the industries, knowing the companies, but also like understanding what's going on and like figuring out like what skill set do you have that would be very useful for those senior leaders, and what like in a way that they need it, right? So for example, right now, anyone who's starting and has like any, I focus on like supply chain and manufacturing. Anyone that understands anything about like tariff and resilience with supply chain and has that kind of experience in any shape or form, if they come and talk to us about that, that's great. Or if somebody comes and is like, you know what, I really understand like data center infrastructure in the tech industry, like somebody is going to be really excited to talk to you. So like understanding what are the big trends, like where's the market going, and understanding like what skill set do you have that you can either directly translate is important. If you have if there are clients that are really big for a specific firm you're going to and you happen to work there or you have like some connection or expertise, like make sure people know about that. That is also really important. Um, in your conversations when you're networking, when you're even though you're asking people for something early in your career, make sure you're also lending your expertise. So what can you always do for somebody else, right? So early on in your career, maybe it's doing some internal firm things and some practice, some things for your like individual practices. So like helping with recruiting or helping with programming or helping with assets that need to be developed so that your firm can sell or whatever the case may be. When you do those things with leaders, it helps you to build some credibility and also build skill set and demonstrate your work ethic. And then you can develop relationships and then you can start talking about the work that you want to do. If the leader happens to be something that's aligned with what you know or what you want to do, great. But also leaders know other leaders, so they'll connect you and be like, "Oh, you know what? I know somebody else here. Let me know. Let me connect them to you so you can talk," right? That's how a lot of people get their first staffing or get entrenched in a business. The other thing too is that when you do get those opportunities to be billable or to be staffed or whatever it's called at your firm, is to like execute, right? So one, execute well, deliver what you need to deliver well, and start building relationships and credibility at the client. So doing things like obviously doing your work, like performing your deliverables, but making sure when you're in meetings or anytime you have an opportunity to be in a room with other people, speak up. It doesn't matter how new you are. Like, bring an idea, bring a perspective, bring in something that's going to add to the conversation so that people are always intrigued to have you in the room and know that you're going to be delivering good work. And if you consistently do that, right, delivering good work, then you start getting opportunities to like lead something. So being able to do something by yourself. Once you demonstrate being able to do something well by yourself, it's like, how can you then help other people to do that too? So how are you developing your like manager leadership capabilities? Then how can you lead something like more cross-functionally across different work streams as well? And as you start to basically like take pressure off of leaders in different ways, either in the work you're doing or the way you're contributing to the firm, that's how you start to kind of build that credibility and that relationship. And then that helps you to build your brand and reputation within your organization and with clients as well.
Wow, thank you so much, Lillian. It sounds like that kind of like putting yourself out there, that self-promotion piece is so important. Alexander, do you have something to add?
I did, and I'm sorry, I
No,
apologize.
you're fine.
But I wanted to underscore Lillian's great point about when you're in the room, make sure that you're not just in the corner, not saying anything. I think as someone more junior, you can always think, oh, they don't care about my perspective. But to Lillian's point, I feel like the the more senior I get, and it sounds like Lillian feels the same way, the more I care to have people who will tell you how they think it is and where you might not be seeing gaps. And you're in the data typically most of the time in a way that someone more senior isn't. And so having people who are willing to speak their mind, willing to speak up and not push back, but provide other thoughts can be really, really important. So I thought that was a great point, and I just wanted to underscore it.
Great. Thank you very much. Alexander, we're actually going to go back to you for our next question. So, what's the biggest stretch role or assignment you've taken on through your consulting career, and how did you prep for success on that role? What did you learn from that experience?
Yeah, like Lillian, I do a lot of work in manufacturing and distribution, and that was something that I really only started when I started managing projects. So one of my largest projects that I'd ever done to that point was in a distribution client. I really didn't know that much about distribution. It was a very extensive project across different work streams, across different parts of their commercial organization. And so it felt like there were multiple things that I was learning at once. One is the industry, the client, things that we've talked about before. Two was the management of more resources on our internal side, as well as more external stakeholders to be thinking about. How do we talk to this person differently than we talk to this person? In a lot of our work, and I'm guessing Madeline and Lillian's as well, there's also typically the stakeholder of a private equity or venture capital firm. And so you have to talk to them really differently than you need to talk to just a project manager or even a CEO, because they have very different requirements and things that they're thinking about because of their investment. And so really thinking about, how often do I communicate looks really different with some of these different stakeholders. And you may even need to think about how you deploy your team a little bit differently. So for example, a lot of the time when you first start managing projects, you think about managing down, managing the resources that work with you. But in these big projects, you actually spend a lot of time managing up, asking your partners or the senior directors to actually go out and do X, Y, and Z for you and start kind of bossing the bosses around, if you will. So that felt like a really big assignment to me because it was so many different kind of learning experiences at once, especially then with a team who also didn't have a great deal of experience in some of these things, and making sure that we were keeping the morale high. Consulting is a long job sometimes, especially on a long project. The days can be long, the hours can be long, the travel can be long, especially if you're going places that maybe don't make it onto your dream destinations. And so the role of someone new to an organization, as well as someone who's been around more often, is really thinking about what are the positives here? How can I think about what I'm doing well versus what my team is doing well, and kind of keep that morale going. From a kind of a preparation perspective, I can't underscore, I think, in consulting enough, the power of being prepared. And I think Madeline mentioned that when it comes to networking, but knowing what you want to get out of each meeting, knowing kind of how we progress forward over the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, that is a really powerful tool for anything new that you do in consulting. And it makes you look prepared to all of the different stakeholders, both internal and external, that I mentioned before. I think it's also leveraging some of your internal resources. So there are people who have done this before, and you are not the first one, but not being scared to reach out to the folks that are involved in the project, or even those in kind of formal or informal mentorship, to ask how they do it. Do they have any templates? Are there things that they've seen work particularly well or not? I think that is kind of the power of consulting. You're not typically the first one who's done this. And even if you are on a similar project, there's always something that's close enough that you can start to borrow from it. So I think that from my perspective, it's really thinking about what do I not know? That's always kind of number one. And how do I get from what I don't know right now to what kind of my dream destination is of being able to do this right? And so thinking about, these are how I actually go out and get the project management skills I need, or the industry knowledge that I need. A lot of that lives within your firm, and you can go out and get that internally.
Great. I'm hearing use your resources. All right. So, Lillian, we're going to you for the next one. It can sometimes seem like the consulting industry rewards high output, constant motion. How have you learned to recognize when your work is truly good enough? So balancing that quality with efficiency and avoiding, the trap of what can be perfectionism for so many people.
I think it's very important to take MBA time to understand how to take care of yourself and recognize burnout. So you have to prioritize yourself. So consulting, just like any other industry, is going to take everything that you give to it. So you need to set boundaries for yourself and make other people adhere to that, right? And I think that's really important, and it's something people get really scared about starting off in any of these professions, but in the long run, it is detrimental to you and your health and your loved ones and your relationships if you don't realize that early enough, right? Um, it can be really sad and when that is not taken care of, right? And I have tons and tons of cautionary tales in consulting and in my previous career of what that looked like and how that resulted for other people. So that's like number one. I think using different ways to do that in a respectful way, right? So I also don't advocate saying like, hey, the vibes are off, I don't want to work today. That's not okay. However, understanding and making very clear what you need to do and setting those expectations with your managers and your teams and your peers of this is what we need to do and this is when we need to get it done. So all of those project management and all of those like organizational skills, using that to say, okay, understand that we have this big problem, but what are we trying to attack? What do we need to get done first? What is priority, right? What's needed? Understand the full scope of what you're doing and piece that out in a manageable way. If there's competing priorities, that's how you leverage your leadership and leverage your teams to be like, and your client and say, okay, understand that these are all the things that need to get done. What's the most important? And helping them to frame and say, this is ultimately what we're trying to drive towards. Do you agree with that? Okay, here's what I think is what we need to do by making sure you have good plans, you have good approaches, and you have good strategies. By the way, these are all the things that we're looking for in a case interview. But by being able to like demonstrate that or help to drive that for your like leaders and your teams and your client, that helps you to eliminate some of that chaos and helps you to stay like kind of organized in like the work that you need to do. Um, the other thing too is that there will be ebbs and flows, right? There's times when the work is going to be like tough, but where you know, by giving yourself that plan, you can also plan in for like some like flexibility of like what some days are going to be, some days or weeks are going to be like tough weeks, so you can plan ahead as much as you can. But the other importance of networking that besides just like getting staffed and progressing your career is to build relationships, right? So that when you start getting to a point where you feel overwhelmed, you feel empowered to talk to somebody and say, you know what? This is becoming a little bit much for me. How can I help to distill this, right? Because a lot of times the reason people get burnt out and the reason they get overwhelmed is because they're trying to take a lot of things on their own and not trying to leverage resources to say, how can I get this done differently? One thing is the longer you're in consulting or at any company, you'll hopefully develop friendships. Hopefully you like the people you work with. So you'll have people to call and say, you know what, I'm working on this thing, or I have this problem, or I'm working with this industry or this client, and this is what's going on. And somebody will say inevitably, oh, I did this in this place. Let me help you out. Or there's always somebody who's probably like interested in doing something else that you're doing as well. So you can find people to partner and do that work together. So build your network so you have those relationships, so you can ask those questions, so you can eliminate those moments where you feel like the work is too much. And number one thing is protect your mental health, take care of yourself, set those boundaries, put blocks on your calendar, make sure people know that, and don't try to bend who you are for work, right? Because it's not worth it. We want you to stay alive and thriving. We want you to be a whole person because ultimately, when firms are hiring you, they're hiring you for your best version of yourself. And so if we as organizations are not allowing you to do that, you need to push back in professional and polite ways to make sure you get what you need.
Wow, that is amazing advice. And I hope everyone takes that to heart, no matter what industry you end up in. So thank you for that, Lillian. I think we're going to stop our predetermined questions there, just so we have some time for maybe a couple audience questions. So the first one that came up, I know this was touched on a little bit, but I'd like to dive deeper. So if somebody is coming from a background that is maybe not even a business background, how can they position themselves to be successful in this industry? It, it's obviously networking and things like that, but what are some other skills or strategies or specific resources you'd recommend?
I think it's super important to position your different perspective and trying to like leverage what your perspective is differently because one thing that will happen in consulting, especially because depending on the firm, sometimes people specialize in certain types of consulting, certain types of industries, and people also get put in practice areas, right? In groups within like the larger firms. It's so nice to have people bring in a different perspective because inevitably we have groupthink and we're thinking about things the same way and we're not thinking about things that may be important. Especially if we've done something over and over again at the same place, it's infusing like, hey, what does that mean for today? What does that mean for today's problems or tomorrow's problems? Or how do we need to adapt something differently? I love working with people of different functional expertise as well, because a lot of times when a client comes to us and asks for help on something, it's also incumbent upon us as consultants to come in with the total solution that's actually going to help them, not just the one thing that they asked for. So bringing in those differing perspectives is important. So even if everyone says I don't have a traditional background, nobody has a traditional background. That doesn't exist. There's no one thing that matters, right? The traditional background for a consultant is being able to bring in your perspective and leveraging that in whatever way we need to solve the problems we're doing for our clients and also for ourselves.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so we have, I think, time for one more question. Are there any trends or things that you kind of foresee or things that you're starting to see happening as far as skill sets that are important now for consultants to have? Maybe things that are like, I don't know if it's related to AI or tech or whatever it might be, if there's kind of some things that you're seeing come onto the horizon.
I think there's at least we've seen an increased need for data scientists in terms of supporting the consulting staff. So some of them are consultants, some of them are more um, kind of back end resources that do I hate that term, but that kind of support the consultants. So the where there are places that you feel comfortable or know things around machine learning or data science or AI, there certainly is an additional need to do that. I do think that some of those kind of buzzwords tend to be overused. And so as long as you're able to make sense of some of these things, I think to the points that have been made, being kind of quick on your feet and also being able to take all of those things as inputs, I think are super important, but you may yourself not need to know a great deal about data science. You may just need to be able to understand the output and then translate that into something that makes sense to your client. But we are seeing more of those kind of support functions become more and more important as we talk to our clients.
I think another skill set is kind of trying to there's and this is not to like diminish anything about like AI and what's happening now, but as you work, right, throughout your career, you're going to see these different evolutions of technology, right? I think the thing that is not missing, but is being like underappreciated is understanding like the fundamental core um tenets of whatever is really important for like for what an industry, but also there's just kind of like core consulting and like strategy skills that I think are really important. So being able to communicate effectively is incredibly important. Being able to prioritize and distill information is important. Critical thinking skills are really, really, really important. Being able to frame all of the information and data and technology into like a thoughtful way that aligns with the very real world problems that these organizations are trying to solve is very important. And that is going to transcend any technology wave or any innovation wave. So that's really important. And then I think another thing, which is not necessarily like something you're going to take a course for in business school, but flexibility in this market is really important. So understanding like this is the skill set I have, or this is what I'm wanting to pursue, but knowing that I'm going to need to change this because the workplace and the market are changing, and what they want and need from us as workers is changing. So, always being amenable to learn new skill sets, always being amenable to adapt what you're doing to something slightly different is going to be like necessary, because the market of our like parents and grandparents, where you did the same thing for 30 or 40 years, is like over, except for maybe a certain subset of the like economy. So being able to build that flexibility, learn new skill sets, and also learn how to partner with other people in different ways is going to be really important.
I also just really quickly, um, both amazing answers. I think what I would say in addition is like, I get the question a lot of like, what did you do in business school to prepare? And to be honest, there's not like one thing you can do. There's not like a specific class. It's like consulting 101, or a specific hard skill. And I do think consulting does kind of lend itself to a lot of those softer skills of like communication and problem solving and kind of those other buzzwords which I know are buzzwords, but they do actually make an impact. Um, so I was going to say, just like take on leadership roles and like fill your days in business school, and or if like you know of people that are in college too, like take on opportunities to like set yourself up to lead and to manage and get that exposure prior to a consulting role, because there's a lot of things that are going on in a certain day or in a certain case that you just like have incredibly busy days. And so I think being able to like in business school have busy days across a lot of different things across class, or maybe you're taking on a role in consulting club, or you're helping to case your classmates or other, like maybe you're like a TA in a class, like whatever it is, busy yourself so that you can like speak to that stuff also in interviews is really helpful. But then also like you'll just be better prepared to prioritize and time manage when you're actually in the job.
Great. Thank you all so much for your answers to that one. Unfortunately, we are out of time. So thank you to all of our participants today who asked thoughtful questions and engaged with our panelists. And another big thank you to our panelists, Madeline, Lillian, Alexandra. You are all so amazing, and we appreciate you sharing your expertise, experience, and time with our audience today. I want to make sure everyone is aware of our upcoming workshop, Case Interviews 101. So we just heard about how important that is. This will be with LEK Consulting, and the session is next week on Thursday. So you'll get a brief intro to LEK, including the U.S. consultant and U.S. summer consultant roles, and then you'll participate in a case interview workshop that will introduce you to different frameworks and include opportunities to work through a practice case. So we hope to see you there. I think the registration link will pop up in the chat here. And then I also wanted to make sure everyone knew our MBA Virtual Leadership Conference for MBA students is taking place on September 12th. Registration is now open, and the early bird rate for MBA member school students is open until August 18th. So make sure you're on top of that registration date. Please join us for some amazing content from accomplished business leaders. And then there's also a virtual career expo component to that event. So we hope to see you there. Everyone, we hope you enjoyed this Conquer Your Career consulting session. Please be sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms and visit our website for even more helpful information on different careers and professional development topics. There's a ton of great resources there for you to explore. And a recording of this webinar and lots of other ones are available on demand on our website. So thank you everyone again for joining. We look forward to seeing you at another Forte event in the near future, and I hope everyone has a great day.